Dziarski duch, silny, pewny, mocny ruch. Skoszę teraz, a zagrabię sobie potem.
Okay, it's 3 p.m. now. Shall we start? Hi. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Okay, it's 3 o'clock sharp, and we have a really tight schedule. So I want to welcome all of you here with us today for this off the record Shopee's Turbulent 2022. What's next for e-commerce in Southeast Asia? And my name is Yolin. I'm the CEO of Momentum Works and head of Momentum Academy. And I'm really happy to be doing this talk with all of you. And some of you who came in earlier may have heard the really fun song in the background just now. And that's actually part of this entire presentation. And I will leave it to the team here to share more about what is this song, why it is here, and then why it's actually linked to the e-commerce landscape. Okay, so next page, next slide. Okay, a bit about Momentum Academy. So we are hosting this talk and we're really excited. It is our fourth off the record talk of the year. And what we do is that we're part of Momentum Works, and we use these kind of insights to run workshops, case studies, immersions, and in this case, a talk to help leaders immerse in innovation and validate and execute your strategy. Right, next page. Some of our partners would include, just to give you a glance, next page. And what we have done in the last few years is that we've analyzed the global expansion of many tech players, including the likes of Meituan, Sea, Lazada, ByteDance, etc. Next page. And we Janga especially, have synthesized the key takeaways into this book that is now available from Amazon and in bookshops across key bookstores in selected countries, right? So we're really proud of this book. It was launched in September. Next page. And really proud of the team that's with us today. We come from 15 countries, 4 continents, and we come from a various number of backgrounds, and you will hear some of them speaking today as well. Okay, next page. And as all of you may know, that we have a very unique insights team. And in the last year, we've actually launched quite a number of reports. So aside from Shopee that you'll hear more about today, we are going deep into Web3. We also have lots of company-specific insights, etc. Okay, next page. So, and segueing very nicely, we've covered a lot about Shopee in the last 1 or 2 years with lots of blogs and reports. We even did our first off the record beginning of the year behind Shopee's doors. So this is the November, near the end of the year, another update. Okay, and then next page. So on this note, I'm going to pass it on to Jangan to take us through this 1 hour.
Good afternoon, guys, and it's been a very interesting year. And as we're nearing the end of the year, we just thought it would be nice for us to share about some of the observations and some of the perspectives that we have about this year, Shopee, and specifically what's going to happen to Southeast Asia's e-commerce ecosystem. So on this deck, on this page, you will see 3 things, right? I mean, Shopee's 2022 is very different from 2021. And of course, some of you might be wondering when we list the competition, we have Lazada, everyone knows, we have TikTok Shop, which is growing aggressively across 6 markets in Southeast Asia. And we also listed Temu, which is run by Pinduoduo. And that company has been making very aggressive incursion in the North American market. But there are lots of parallels that we think would be relevant to this presentation, as well as what we see in Shopee. So of course, after so many years of development, e-commerce is already deeply entrenched in Southeast Asia. Lots of us who are living in different capital cities, I think all of you would have experiences, some of you doing it very frequently, buying things online. And of course, I mean, you have your share of complaints and stuff, and some of you have been selling things, some of you have been designing your brand strategy, what to do with all these platforms that are sort of making very aggressive inroads. And of course, I mean, some people are careerly employed, by these platforms as well as the ecosystem. So we're going to try to cover these topics during this presentation. Next, please. So yeah, so it's divided into 4 sections. First, setting the scene, what has happened, and second, behind the scene. So we talk a little bit about what we think that triggered what happened, and of course we have a section which is a little bit more forward-looking. We will reserve some times for question and answers. I think we've already received a few questions from email before this event, and we'll try our best to answer them. And of course, I mean, during the process of this presentation, if you have any questions, as usual, feel free to type in the chat box. And of course, some of you would note the answers that others have posted, and feel free to comment. So let's make it interactive and constructive discussion. Next page, please. So first section. Next page. This is interesting, right? I mean, it's exactly a year ago, from November 2020 to November 2021. Every time you look at the news, it's basically positive news about Shopee, entering new markets, entering new verticals, and basically increased competitive pressure on their competitors, etc., etc. And of course, the share prices of a C group, which Shopee forms a key part, grew quite significantly during that year. But fast forward to this year. Next page, please. From the start of the year, things were a little bit different, right? I mean, first you have the news of Tencent reducing its stakes of C Limited. And of course, some of you might know that I think yesterday Tencent announced that they were reducing stake. They were giving out stakes in Meituan as dividends to their shareholders. So a lot of things are happening. And in February, Garena's Free Fire got banned. So that took many people, I think, including some of the executives, by surprise. Then you started hearing news about market exits from France, India, Spain, and the other Latin American countries aside from Brazil. So in June, we had one round of layoffs. And of course, in August, there was this big incident of rescinding job offers, etc. So the whole year was basically turbulent with lots of negative news. And of course, I think for people involved, the feeling might be different from the rest of us who are reading the headlines and who are observing from the side, but definitely it's a very, very eventful year. Next page, please. When we look at the global footprint, so almost all the markets that Shopee entered during the pandemic, it has exited, with maybe the exception of Poland, which we actually last month released a report just called Shopee in Poland, where we explained the competitive landscape, etc. So, and of course, I think as some of you have heard from the earnings call earlier this week, they are still very committed to Brazil market, but the rest, I think, will not be a priority for now. Next page, please. And of course, I mean, layoff seems to be a big topic across tech nowadays. And if you read the news, you will see our colleagues being quoted in news almost every week about layoff stories. So for Shopee's case, there has been a few rounds of layoffs, and some of you might recognize this talk. So basically, somebody who got a job offer, flew from China, just landed, and then got a call from HR saying that, okay, the job offer had been rescinded. So a lot of these events obviously had some impact on people's confidence in the company, and it also showed that I think a company which had been in high growth mode for a long time would need lots of effort to actually adjust to a different world. Next page, please. A bit of big background. I think this we all know. Despite the uptick over the last week, the major tech stocks that, as we know, still dropped quite a lot. I think even GoTo, which is listed in Jakarta and with a very small percentage of the shares floating, they still suffered, I mean, a major drop. So this is across the board environment that we're facing. And of course, I mean, most of the major players have not been spared. Next page, please. And of course, I mean, for the past few months, every time the Fed in the US says something, the whole world was watching very closely. People have been talking about the close to zero interest rate that we have been enjoying for a while, and we just thought of like taking out this graph to look at, okay, what has happened in the past. I do remember, I mean, not that old, but I still do remember that at the dot-com crash, and people were saying that, okay, we have been enjoying like low interest rate for a long time, and this is not going to sustain. But what happened next is that the interest rate went even lower. And for the last decade, it has been exceptional. So of course, between 2018 to 2020, there were efforts to try to correct that, but then the pandemic hit. So which in a way delayed a lot of the things that we're seeing today. I mean, layoffs, tech restructuring, etc., etc. But people have been saying that, okay, are we going to adjust ourselves to a new world for the next 20, 30 years? There have been lots of predictions. Honestly, from our point of view, we don't know. Next page, please. And specifically about the Southeast Asia. So this is a chart of different currencies versus US dollar, and I think it was charted last week, so it didn't factor in the recent change. It didn't factor in the recent change, but you can see that, I mean, many of the currencies of the markets that the Shopee has been operating in has been impacted. I mean, the Southeast Asian currencies plus the Polish zloty, yeah, has been dropping quite a lot. The only exception is Brazilian reais, so which has actually increased its value. But of course, I mean, this impact lots of things, right? I mean, from people's spending power to the, I mean, and the company's financial performance, because lots of them will be modeled in US dollar, etc. Next page, please. And I do remember in the beginning of the year when we did a session about Grab, and there was a question about the fuel price. I mean, how was that impacting Grab's performance? And I think our sense back then is that, I mean, for the mobility part, and the impact was probably limited because the major market, affluent population, this can be easily transferred. And those of you who are living in the major capital cities in Southeast Asia, you will probably see the prices change quite a bit over the last few months. But e-commerce is more complex, right? I mean, it impacts the supply chain, it impacts the logistic players, in addition to customers' spending power, etc., etc. And we do see that, I mean, the price went up a lot during the middle of the year, and it has been moderating ever since. But the exception is maybe Indonesia and Malaysia. Malaysia still kept subsidizing, and Indonesia sort of withdrew their subsidy in September. I was in Jakarta back then. I think there was a major protest happening right outside my hotel. So all these things are complex issues which are impacting people's sort of confidence in spending, as well as the whole ecosystem's the confidence in investing. And of course, there's lots of analysis about, I mean, what exactly the impact is. The truth is that it's actually quite hard to know for sure, because much of the data is not real time. Next page, please. And of course, this year we see two major competitors of Shopee. First is Lazada, and some of you, especially those who live in Singapore, you'd remember this golden monkey, which has been hanging out outside Lazada's headquarters building. Although this monkey has nothing to do with Lazada, but maybe has some significance. So we do see a few moves in Lazada, which we interpret as being positive, and of course that adds to a bit of competitive pressure to Shopee. And of course, TikTok Shop. Last year it was expanding aggressively in Indonesia, but it was really learning how to operate outside China for this kind of content e-commerce. So this year you will see that first they have expanded to multiple markets, all the 6 markets in Southeast Asia, and second, format has changed quite a bit. We remember that from the beginning, there was lots of content in short videos, and now it has evolved to much more than that, which my colleague will explain in a bit, and about what exactly these changes are and how that's going to impact the e-commerce landscape. Next page. So we drew this this flywheel last year, and drawing a flywheel for a company, whether you are inside company or outside company, has never been a easy process, because on the one hand, you see that these things which seemingly logically makes sense. On the other hand, especially of you who have been operators in Southeast Asia, you would know that many of the things that you do, there's lots of friction in the market. So things are often not as easy as people see. But fundamentally, as we stand here towards the end of the year, there are a few questions we're asking, right? I mean, is Shopee really in decline? I think we wrote a number of commentaries on that. And the second is that is e-commerce saturated in Southeast Asia? So there have been a few arguments. Last year, we published some numbers, and people were saying that, hey, the numbers are already big. So, and as percentage of retail, is there any further room for growth, or have we reached the saturation point? The third, can Shopee reverse its fortunes? This, I think we really need to look beyond headlines to look at, I mean, what's really going on in the company, and what's impacting what's happening now. And of course, the last question is that is TikTok Shop a formidable foe, or are they just copying Shopee's strategies? So what's eventually the fundamental mode that all these companies are trying to build? Next. So now we're moving to the second section, where we talk a little bit about numbers, what's happening, competition, a little bit of detail. Next page, please. So we put the GMV of Shopee over the last few years, and you would see that, okay, there was significant growth especially from 2019 to 2021, but as of 2022, especially for the last 2 quarters, I mean, things have moderated quite a bit. So essentially from Q2 to Q3 this year, it has been flat. Of course, the take rate has been inching up a bit. And on the ground, I mean, of course, there are many signals coming in. I mean, people are saying that, the ad spending has reduced. The logistic players are saying that, okay, we're getting fewer parcels, and you have people who just conducted the Double 11 campaign saying that, oh, we are not getting as many orders as we did last year. So of course, I mean, how do you find out what's really going on amid all this noise? Next page, please. Yep. And now retrospectively, this is the map about the cash position, as well as the cash losses of C Group as a whole for the last few years. And now if you look at the cash position now, and you know that, okay, the fundraise last September was really a close shave, right? I mean, if they didn't raise that amount of money, and now they would have been in a very difficult situation, and they would have been required to control their spending much more. So if you look at the current cash position, and if you factor that into last quarter's cash burn, and even factor into the convertible bond, which I think is priced at 90, which was supposed to expire in a year and a half's time, they will still have enough cash to sustain themselves for a while. So they still have time to prove that it can be profitable. And of course, there has been a few positive signs from the latest release. And of course, there's also a timeline set for end of 2023 for Shopee to be breaking even at the adjusted EBITDA level. So, but that was a close shave. Next page, please. We look at these two numbers in their quarterly reports. We think they are very interesting. So first is the property and equipment. So basically, their capital expenses. This has been inching up, and of course they have addressed that in the earnings call earlier this this week. So basically, in the past, this would include acquiring office, acquiring servers, acquiring sort of warehouse and other equipment for logistics. But the sense is that I mean the office space as well as the servers have been reduced to minimum levels because they basically canceled their plan to launch a cloud service, and most of the investment nowadays are probably going to the logistics part, which is actually quite beneficial to the business. So we'll talk about that later. And the second thing is that we know that they have been running some consumer lending businesses, which have been doing quite well. And in the earnings release this week, they finally made it public. I mean, this number is always on the balance sheet, but this time they made it into the presentation saying that, hey, now we have more than 2 billion loan book with a non-performing loan ratio of less than 4%. So which means that this is actually quite healthy and profitable business. So will it eventually replace Garena to be the cash cow for the whole group to further build its ecosystem? It can be quite interesting prospect to watch. Next page, please. We also realized there's something interesting about the markets they are in, right? I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Poland, but many of you are definitely familiar with Indonesia. So the two countries are very similar in not only the flag, but also a few other factors which we think are pretty interesting. So urbanization rate, actually quite similar. So that's contrast to people's belief that Europe is much more urbanized than Southeast Asia. The level of economic growth is actually quite similar as well. The population of Indonesia is obviously much larger, like 8 or 9 times bigger than Poland. But if you look at the absolute GDP in current terms, Indonesia is just twice the size of Poland. And in terms of the venture capital that each country received in 2021, Indonesia received almost 10 times the venture capital compared to Poland. So obviously the question mark here is that have we over-invested in Indonesia, or have we under-invested in Poland? I mean, when Shopee entered Poland, there was a very, very strong local competitor that I think Amazon and Alibaba have not been able to defeat. Next page, please. So in a report we released last week, we actually did a pretty deep dive into the e-commerce ecosystem in Poland, and all the infrastructure compared to Southeast Asia back in 2015, 2016 in Poland has been very advanced. I think there were like tens of thousands of parcel locker networks across Poland, and lots of the parcels actually delivered to the locker instead of to households. So that's something that many Southeast Asian countries have been trying to do, but have not reached large scale yet. And in terms of payment, most people have debit cards, and the banks also have instant sort of a transfer system. So basically, lots of infrastructure which was already there. And but of course, the country as we stand now is very negatively affected by the war next door in Ukraine. And you remember in a previous slide we mentioned about the currency, which has reduced quite a lot. So in the short term, it's actually quite turbulent. But what has Shopee done in Poland? Next page. I'm going to pass this to my colleague Karolina, who is actually from Poland.
Thank you, Jangan. So in Poland, I would say that Shopee introduced very similar tactics in terms of customer acquisition. So it entered last year around September, and it became much more popular around May this year with introduction of Baby Shark in Polish version, and then you could hear it around the radio and on social apps. And we also can see that they introduce some festivals every month and try to be localized because last few months they also have a Polish brand ambassador. I would also say that Poland is very price sensitive, and you can see that from the more or less historical perspective, because at some point after the fall of communism, we were very scarce in consumer products. So based on that, customer behavior was created in a way. So the generation of people between 40 to 60 years old want to acquire a lot of goods, and they think about the price. It is very important for them to buy things cheaply. Very different from the current generation of youngsters. They do think about the price, but they also look at the quality of goods, and some of them try to have more minimalized lifestyle. Okay, next slide, please. So the brand ambassador right now, it's Sławomir. He's a musician and produces rock polo music. In Polish, it's called disco polo. This is a very important type of music in Poland because you can hear it on the weddings, on the festivals, and it started to be popular again after the fall of communism. It talks about happiness, freedom, colorful life that people didn't have back then. So a lot of sentiments, especially in the older generation, is towards to this music. In the younger generation, you have also some groups that really follow, some don't. And the music that we had at the beginning of the presentation is done by Sławomir. Next slide.
Thank you, Carolina. So I was actually having discussion with Carolina and a few other colleagues actually before this call. We're saying that because there's lots of discussion about why Shopee and AliExpress worked in Poland, and whilst Amazon find it very difficult to operate in Poland. So obviously, and we compared our parents' generation, those who grew up in before the fall of communism or before the opening up. So their mentality, their way of spending, their way of accumulating goods or their way of perceiving what is good goods that they should buy, is actually quite different from the current generation. So in terms of spending, there's quite a bit of similarities, and that actually makes it very interesting. So and of course, in Poland, you have a strong local player called Allegro, which is a public listed company in a local bourse. And of course you have AliExpress and Amazon. So Allegro, which has been around pretty much since like the late 1990s, is in a way similar to how long Mercado Libre has been around in Latin America. So they have built a very, very sophisticated business, I mean, since the desktop age. And if you look at their revenue stream, it's actually obviously much richer compared to Shopee, and also compared to AliExpress and Amazon. And of course, for a long time, Amazon was not really operating seriously in Poland. On the website of Amazon.pl was actually translated from German, and the operations was operating out of Germany. So things have become more competitive there. And I've heard a number of Chinese platforms saying that Poland is actually a very positive market for them. Just after Russia, but of course this year Russia's market has been impacted quite a bit, and the Polish market has been impacted as well because of the current situation. But nonetheless, this is a very interesting area that I think, especially for people who are living in Southeast Asia, we don't normally see, right? I mean, so companies from this region taking the methodologies that they have learned here as well as in China, going to Europe and try to make it work. But of course, Europe as a whole is very complicated. I'll leave that to my colleague Simon to explain a little bit. Next page.
Thank you, Changan. Yeah, as we've already seen, Shopee has tried to enter many European countries, but also has quite recently withdrawn again from that, except from Poland. So you could think that the e-commerce market in Europe seems to be quite complicated. And we also try to understand how it works. So you can broadly summarize two different players on European e-commerce market, which is on the one hand, the big players like Amazon, eBay, and AliExpress, who want to serve the whole market and different countries. And on the other hand, you will find local players, which are niche players or also offline retailers which have expanded their business to online retail. Besides that, we have noticed that, of course, you also have to take into account that there are cultural nuances and preferences which differ from country to country. And for example, we've tried to think what differences there are, and sometimes it's difficult to name these or explain these. So this means as a company, you have to go there and try out your strategy and see if it works for that market, because otherwise it's quite difficult to know beforehand which things can work and how different nuances of the cultural will impact your business.
Thank you, Simon. So I mean, I had a bit of exposure in Latin America as well, in addition to Southeast Asia, as well as Middle East. So we look at Latin America. On the one hand, you think about, I mean, all these countries speaking the same language, but on the other hand, I mean, each country is really different because of the history and what people have gone through collectively. So we discussed with Carolina about, I mean, the parents' generation in Poland, their spending habits, and of course, I mean, each different country in Europe, they've been through a different history, different collective memory. And what there are similarities of what people would need in life, but the actual spending behavior, the way they respond to promotions, and what will click for them from e-commerce point of view can be quite different. Next page, please. So of course, in February this year, we heard headlines that Shopee to start shopping in France, and they put up this Avis de fermeture in a French site, so saying that, okay, they were going to close on the 6th of March. But actually, if you look at the ranking of Shopee app, especially on Google Play Store in France, you will know that, okay, they actually abandoned the French market pretty much as early as end of the year of 2021, so which was basically 6 weeks after they entered France. No, we have not been able to speak to anyone directly involved in this to understand why, but we got this comment from a competitor of Shopee's who was operating in France as well, and from Asian background, and what they said is that we don't know why, but French consumers just do not respond to our campaigns. We could run marketing to get them to the campaign landing page, but they just don't convert. So of course, I mean, so linking back to all the new markets that Shopee tried to enter last year, and obviously Poland made lots of sense. I mean, things are doing well, and of course they have made commitment to Brazil, so which means that there are certain things which they have been doing which are working well in Brazil, but in other markets you see various challenges. So the question is that as a company, do they have the enough sort of mental space? Do they have the enough sort of resources to actually figure out each different challenge in each market? And while the capital market is requiring them to show a shorter path through profitability. So that's a big question mark. And we don't have it here, but if you look at the same graph in Google Play Store rankings for Spain, so they hesitated a bit in towards the end of 2021 as well, but then they decided to carry on, so restart the marketing, etc. But of course, I mean, this year turned out to be much more different from what people had anticipated. They eventually had to exit from Spain as well, which I mean, the trial they had in these markets are fairly small scale. They had much more orders in India. So the question is that, I mean, is that a major setback, or is that just a diversion which they could, I mean, if they have the resources later on, they could always come back to. Next page, please. Another thing which is really interesting is the seed money part. Of course, there are lots of companies in Southeast Asia which are building digital financial services based on their consumer tech platforms, and also there's lots of attempts to build digital banks. So what we look, I mean, if you have been following what's happening, Shopee or seed money per se has accumulated quite a number of licenses to operate different services in different markets. They have insurance companies in Indonesia and the Philippines, and of course they have the banking license in Singapore, Malaysia. I think the Singapore bank has already been launched to their employees. and they acquired a bank in Indonesia. I renamed it Cbank the previous year, and of course their 7% deposit rate attracted lots of deposits from consumers in Indonesia. In addition to that, I mean, buy now pay later, obviously that helps e-commerce conversion, as Alipay's experience has shown to Alibaba. The consumer lending part has been, I think, expanding quite well. We talked about that, a 2-point-something billion loan book with a very low NPL ratio. So it's interesting that they are building the data based on e-commerce customer base, which allow them to actually do a lot of things, and this part could be quite interesting. And if you look at Ant Group's experience in China, it should be profitable, if not very profitable. And addition to that, another thing that I've been building is logistics. That I think I'll get Simon to explain a little bit.
Yes, exactly. As we have already heard earlier this talk, that Shopee is investing heavily in property and equipment.
Next page, please.
Yeah, exactly. Now we can see it. As we have heard earlier this talk, Shopee has heavily invested in property and equipment, which is mainly due investments in logistics. And therefore, we wanted to analyze how Shopee is positioned in terms of, for example, service points for consumers, but as well as for distribution hubs. And therefore, we've tried to find out how many of those exist in the different Southeast Asian countries. And now here on the map, we can see that this goes quite hand in hand with those investments and is also quite aligned with the population density in those countries, as you can see it on this density map. And yeah, the most investments seem to be in Indonesia, Malaysia, and also in Thailand. So those seem to be the focus markets.
A obvious consequence of Shopee's aggressive expansion into logistics, Shopee Express specifically, and of course, some people have been doubting that. Okay, as an e-commerce company, why do you invest in capital-heavy assets, which obviously doesn't carry a high multiple, whatever. But if you look at the experience in China, specifically, also in the US, that I think e-commerce platforms, eventually, if they don't have enough negotiation power or don't control either the traffic entry part or the fulfillment part, their value will eventually be squeezed, because you can always have others which have the consumer, have the fulfillment capabilities, trying to challenge you. So I think beginning of the year we had a chat with one of our clients who was evaluating the logistic investment in Southeast Asia. So we're a little bit cautious. I mean, aside from the few big ones, right? I mean, JNT, etc. The other third-party logistic providers, we just don't think that it could be a very interesting aspect unless they own critical assets, right? I mean, most cities in Southeast Asia are not designed as methodically as cities in China. So occupying prime logistic warehousing locations could probably be a competitive advantage, because that means a lot of difference in terms of efficiency and operational excellency. So but here the situation we are seeing now is that because Shopee has been investing aggressively in logistics, so the amount third-party logistic players can charge Shopee on a per order basis, at least we know Indonesia and the Philippines have reduced drastically. And of course, I mean, all these companies went to work with TikTok, which at the moment doesn't really care too much about the cost. Of course, eventually they will do that, but this changing landscape is quite interesting. And for this part, we believe that I think Shopee is doing a right thing. So, next page, please. We also talk a little bit about Lazada. I think at the beginning we mentioned that, okay, Lazada is doing a few things which are right. So we're trying to say that, okay, what's the best way to illustrate what they have done? So of course, end of last year, Alibaba did some restructuring. So there was one person now in charge of a domestic commerce business. There's one person, Jiang Fan, who is used to be the the head of Taobao and Tmall, who's now in charge of international businesses. So this person within the Alibaba ecosystem is a bit divisive, right? I mean, people know, some people respect him, and lots of people find him rude. So, but at the end of the day, I think he was an effective operator, and I think born in 1985, if I remember correctly. I think he's young enough to actually break things. So, which is something that probably the overseas business of Alibaba would need at this stage. Li Chun, the previous CEO, had been replaced. He had been working quite hard to change a few things at Lazada while he was he was the CEO. I think a bit of challenge comes from the organizational part, right? I mean, for large organization with multiple countries and also with unlimited amount of lines of communication between the headquarters in Singapore with the countries, as well as Hangzhou, Shanghai, Shenzhen, etc. So it's actually a very complex organization to run. So Li Chun has been replaced by James Stone, and his profile is interesting if you think about it. So he has the Alibaba Group experience, he has the McKinsey experience, he has the experience of running a country. If you believe in the filings they send to Thailand's authorities, Lazada Thailand is actually profitable. So basically, when this combination comes together, theoretically, if someone were to move Lazada, I think he would be the most suitable candidate. And one of the things that he did not long after being appointed is to remove, or whatever we call it, Magnus Ekblom, who was the last original co-founder who's still standing, and we have a photo of Magnus with Martel, who's actually a pretty good guy, back in 2013, and you can see that what 10 years of Lazada does to your hair. Next page, please. So you would see a few things happening. Lazada bought into Dana, which is the e-wallet that Ant Group built together with MTech. I mean, if you look at now, the shareholding structure, it's basically Alibaba, Lazada, and with the with Cinemas coming in, but Cinemas is occupying a small stake. So and also they have become a shareholder of a Touch and Go in Malaysia, which I mean, someone from Malaysia would know that pretty much everybody's forced to use that because of the new scheme of getting the cars to have the RFID tag linked to a e-wallet to pay for the highway toll. I mean, almost everyone in Malaysia drives, so this is pretty significant. These two companies are hugely loss-making, but you will see something positive about Lazada coming, because I mean, for a long time, you probably know that a lot of the payment and credit issues of fintech issues of Lazada had been handled by Ant, which was definitely very capable and very experienced. But from an organizational point of view, when things happen, I mean, many of my friends in Singapore would have the experience of very legitimate credit card transactions being rejected and the customer service not able to help. So all these issues, which came as a result of unclear sort of a division of responsibility, so are now being resolved. And of course, what exactly will happen afterwards, we don't know yet. And there's talk about the Europe expansion, since AliExpress has been doing fairly well in certain parts of Europe, and of course, I mean, the whole positioning of AliExpress makes it difficult for brands to work with them. Maybe Lazada has a better brand. So these are all possibilities. The only thing is that none of this will be easy at the execution level. Next page, please. Now we look at the other competitor, TikTok, and of course, domestically in China, TikTok's cousin Douyin has been aggressively doing e-commerce, and their GMV has been jumping in leaps and bounds. And for TikTok per se, so this year it has expanded into 6 countries in Southeast Asia, in addition to basically its operation in Indonesia. We heard that they have a fairly aggressive year-end targets for Indonesia, and of course there are lots of questions associated with that. And for a little bit more detail, I'll leave that to my colleague Crystal, who you might have known for our live commerce report.
So yeah, so as Chang'an mentioned that, next slide, please. Yeah. As Chang'an mentioned that TikTok has been very busy. Actually 2 months ago, Momentum Works visited TikTok's Indonesia office. At that time, it has already have more than 1,000 employees there. Most of the positions there are for e-commerce functions, including business development, content producers, and category operation managers. So that means TikTok has getting really serious about e-commerce. And the reason is clear, is because they want to monetize. The two main revenue stream for TikTok is advertising and e-commerce. For advertisement, the whole digital advertising market is not very optimistic. As you can see on the right, after the growth in 2020, the decline in advertisement revenue is happening for both Meta and Google. So the current environment also has impact on TikTok advertisement revenue. Then if advertisement revenue drops, they need to focus more on the other revenue stream, which is e-commerce. Then greater investment in e-commerce sector, hoping to get like greater conversion as well. Next slide, please. Yes, so TikTok, other than short videos and live streaming, they now have a search-based marketplace, which you can open directly from TikTok's homepage. Like on Douyin, e-commerce is already well embedded with various dedicated presentation feature and discovery elements designed to drive shopping activity. And then TikTok is following a similar trajectory with the search-based marketplace function. So as TikTok already become a key discovery platform for younger audiences who often now search for products and business in TikTok, TikTok can just leverage this opportunity to push e-commerce model more. If you are interested in knowing more about TikTok Shop, stay tuned for our TikTok Shop report, which will probably be launched in January 2023. So if you have more questions, do let us know. We hope to help you to address in our report next year. Back to Jiang'an. Yeah.
Next page, please. Yep. So obviously we talk about the competitors, Lazada and TikTok Shop. We're showing this slide. The reason is that I mean, we know that, okay, we can't look at this Shopee versus TikTok Shop versus Lazada alone. We have to know that, okay, Lazada is part of international commerce business of Alibaba Group. And of course, 66% of Alibaba's revenue comes from Taobao and Tmall, which is their domestic business. So Lazada is a small but yet important part of that. But you can pretty much think about, I mean, what kind of like a group, organizational and people dynamics in a group to actually make Lazada work. So ByteDance, it's the same. I mean, the company seems to be extremely committed to making e-commerce work. As Crystal mentioned, is because it has reached, it basically has taken the screen time away from Meta and other apps, but yet it has not been able to take the marketing dollars away effectively. And of course the whole digital marketing market this year has been reducing, partly thanks to Shopee and Lazada, which have been reducing their spending as well. So the question is that how important is this sort of a monetization through e-commerce internationally? Part of ByteDance, the whole strategy, and how they're thinking about this strategy evolve. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I think even in China, building up a proper e-commerce platform is not exactly straightforward if you want to make it sustainable. I mean, Pinduoduo, etc. Everybody has which has started as content or social commerce, have morphed into something more similar to Taobao, where you have the search, where you have the shops, etc., etc. So the question is that, I mean, how committed are they? How everything functions within a big group, and of course, I mean, how internal and external circumstances would change that conviction and also that execution. Next page. So this is what we wrote in our Shopee in Poland report, and we built this framework: people, organization, product, and leadership, together with Professor Chen of INSEAD. So we look at the company's expansion, and quite often product is really the last thing to worry about. And the leadership is quite important, and obviously we look at Shopee's journey last year. It was a bit of a stretch, and obviously at some point in time the leaders' mind space will be limited to take care of all the nuances in different markets to make different things work. They did have really good lieutenants which they were able to send into the markets. The question is that to make a market, I mean a launcher profile is very different from a long-term general manager. So that transition from a solid launcher for someone who's already familiar with the group into something which is more sustainable at local level. So that part has I think remained to be seen. And for the organization as a whole, there was a bit of a stretch because there are many things which need to be supported for many markets, and obviously so this became difficult for people involved because they have to invest they have to basically interact with much more parties. They have to make much more judgments, and of course they have to basically fight or sort of interact with lots of organizational complexity. So these were all the issues, and if those can't be resolved, your superior product would not lead you anywhere. And I think that's the case we see with lots of Chinese tech companies entering emerging markets. That's also the case we see with Amazon entering many parts of Europe as well as the Middle East. Next page. So what to expect? Next page. So the funny thing staying in Singapore for us the last few months is that we do have a lot of visitors coming from China, and some of them actually quite important figures. So almost everybody would complain about e-commerce in Singapore. And of course, some of them went to Jakarta, they have different complaints, etc., etc. And people use that to benchmark against China, right? I mean, why does it take a week? Why is the seller not responsive? Why is the logistic infrastructure not as good, etc., etc. So all these issues are due to different expectations, and maybe many of the questions actually went to a level to say that how will e-commerce in Southeast Asia eventually evolve into? Will it ever be as efficient and as effective as in China? My personal take is that a lot of the operations that people do in Southeast Asia, they're faced with the infrastructure, which, as for instance, logistics, and no matter how much you do, you will not be as, I mean, in many parts of Southeast Asia, you will never be as efficient as in China. And that's purely gone down to the infrastructure and urban planning, which can't be changed overnight, and it can't even be changed in decades. So to operate as effectively as China, I think the players in this region have to be much more efficient, and that can be a quite tall order. So the question is that if you can't reach the same efficient level, what else can you do? Next page, please. We mentioned about Temu, which is run by Pinduoduo, that went to the US, and now I think it has been topping the charts for a few weeks. And the question is that, is Temu like Wish? Is Temu like Shein? Is Temu like Amazon? But for those of you who are familiar with Pinduoduo, they are very aggressive in execution. They work their people very hard, and I think now they are attacking a niche of e-commerce, which is basically items below 25 or even below $10, which Amazon has not been able to do well, which Wish sort of discovered, but Wish's execution has been very problematic, which Shein has been doing very well in the fashion category. But would Temu be able to build a more comprehensive e-commerce play for that segment, and would that segment eventually allow them to challenge Amazon? So these are interesting prospects, especially in this year where we're facing so much uncertainty in terms of geopolitics. And would they come to Southeast Asia? Next, please. The fundamental question that I think we have to ask, I mean, in addition to all the detailed discussions about logistics, about take rate, about AOV, etc., is there a future for e-commerce in Southeast Asia? What would be the role of platforms be in this future? And how will Shopee stack up versus other platforms in that future? So the photo is taken by a colleague at Shopee's headquarters Shopee's office in Shenzhen. Of course, this is where they house lots of engineers and product people, and this is an area which has suffered a large round of cuts in the recent layoff. But overall, I mean, it doesn't change the fact that we need to look at Shopee not in isolation, but where they will stand in this collective future of e-commerce in Southeast Asia. Next page. For that, I would like to bring it back to something Jack Ma said in 2016. Of course, I mean, you don't hear him say new things anymore, but he has said enough things in the past. And many of them actually came from a deep observation about what's going on and actually operating a difficult business. So here's the quote when he first talked about new retail in October 2016. In the next 10 to 20 years, there will be no e-commerce, only new retail. The combination of online, offline plus modern logistics can truly create a new retail. The era of pure e-commerce will soon come to an end, and the form of pure retail will also be broken. The new retail will lead to a new business model in the future. And I do think that you are starting to see that in Southeast Asia, the online, offline, I mean, each sort of reforming, and there's some combinations starting to happen. It will probably take a different shape compared to what we see in China, but the future is probably definitely not just pure e-commerce. Next page, please.
All
I see
right.
Yolin here. Hi.
Yes. Okay, Zhang Gan,
I hear you.
Thank you for the for this talk. Okay, and really insightful. And we have 3 more minutes left, and 3 to 4 questions. So can I get everybody, if you have more questions, just send it over on the chat or email us, and then we will. Zhang Gan, do you want to choose one question from the list and answer it? The rest we will answer via email and via our blog.
Okay, maybe the latest one. Do you think Shopee's rival Lazada and TikTok will enter fintech in the near future, and how would they diversify revenue stream further? So Lazada definitely. So they are already taking more active control over payment, and from payment they can build more things on top of that, and definitely they can't keep the loss-making payment business loss-making forever. So now they have I think a pretty consistent sort of leadership in payment space. So they will definitely see more things in fintech. But of course, there's always this Lazada and group or and international sort of discussion, because part of service is still provided by Ant. And now it seems to be clear in future how would organization evolve. We're not sure. TikTok eventually, but we really don't see this happening very soon. So they have a bigger problem to prove, is whether they can be a reliable traffic source for e-commerce, which can also convert. So I don't think, I mean, they might be starting to try quickly, but it's a very long-term prospect.
Okay. So in the interest of time, we're reaching 4. So the other questions, please keep them coming. We will answer them via our blogs as usual. And I want to thank everybody for taking time to join us today. And I want to thank the Academy team for actually putting this all together. Thank you, Zhang Gan, Carolina, Simon, Aish, Nanette, and the team for actually getting this. So on this note, I want to wish everybody a good day, and then have a great rest of the week. Okay, thank you, everybody.